Christian nationalism is on the rise in South Africa. That's how a South African woman opened her viral video that's now sparking serious debate online, and she didn't hold back. She argued that even though South Africa is technically a secular state, when you look closely at our politics, our social norms, our leaders, even how we define morality, you realize that religion, especially Christianity, still shapes almost everything. So today, let's unpack that.
Christian nationalism is on the rise in South Africa. It might not be quite as overt as some countries in Africa, such as Uganda or Ghana, or where we're seeing all these anti-gender laws and policies being passed. But we are not as far from that as we think we are. We are a secular state only on paper, but if you really dig deep into the ways in which people rationalize things, how we even talk about how to be a leader, what are the things that women, children, and other marginalized groups should be, how they should act in public, it shows that we have a deeply rooted Christian and religious understanding of what society needs to be like. And I've talked previously about the various ways in which there is a movement, particularly by the evangelical right, to make South Africa into a Christian nation of some sort that is influenced highly by what is happening in the US. And it's about power. And this just has me thinking about how the church, and I'm not speaking particularly about the evangelical church here, but the church as an institution as a whole, mainline, charismatic, Pentecostal, whatever you want to call it, is such a political actor, and a powerful one at that it goes unnoticed. This is why we saw the politicians at church services during election season. This is why we see even churches and the faith-based organizations being consulted, because they are a big demographic in South Africa, and they hold a lot of social power that politicians and those in power and other social actors want to tap into. And I know the next question could be, why isn't the ACDP in power if Christian nationalism is on the rise? So I think the way it manifests in South Africa is that it is not religious in the overt ways. But when you look at the social norms that are entrenched within society, they align to Christian and other religious values. They are about oppression. They are about regression of rights of people that they don't agree with. This idea around the indoctrination of children in schools because of comprehensive sexuality education, the fight against abortion. It wasn't just the ACDP that is against abortion. There were a number of parties. But even thinking about the rise of the former Chief Justice Mogoeng and him thinking around running for president and his waiting for his appointed time to be the president of this country. It is in the norms, it is in the values, and it is in the belief systems that we have as a country where the Christian nationalist agenda is embedded. And we as people who are progressive, people who want to see a world and a South Africa where everyone is free to be who they are, where our human rights are respected, we need to stand up against this. There are too many dormant or central or neutral people in this country that do not realize that their silence or their lack of acting actually invigorates the right and gives them more power than the left.
Is Christian nationalism really growing in South Africa? And if so, what does that mean for democracy, for women, for marginalized people, and for the future of the country? Let's talk about it. First of all, this isn't some faraway idea cooked up by conspiracy theorists. You can actually see what she's talking about if you just open your eyes. Think about how many politicians suddenly turn into worship leaders during election season. One week, they're in parliament shouting at each other, and the next week, they're in church front row clapping offbeat but smiling like they just found Jesus himself. It's not by accident. The church in South Africa is powerful, not just spiritually, but socially and politically. For decades, the church has been a moral compass for communities, a voice during apartheid, and a place where politicians still go to legitimize themselves. Now, to be clear, that influence isn't always bad. Religion can inspire compassion, community, and accountability. But what this woman is pointing out goes deeper. It's about what happens when religion stops being a personal belief and starts shaping national policy, when the line between church and state starts to blur. That's what we call Christian nationalism, the belief that a country should be defined and governed according to Christian values. And she's right. It's not as overt here as it is in places like Uganda or Ghana, where religion is literally influencing anti-LGBTQ+ laws and gender policies. But South Africa isn't that far off. We're a secular state on paper, but socially and culturally, many people see Christian beliefs as the default. Look at how often public debates about women's rights, abortion, or sexuality are framed in moral and religious terms rather than in terms of constitutional rights. She mentioned the former Chief Justice Mogoeng. Remember when he made headlines for saying he's waiting for his appointed time to be president? That raised eyebrows because it sounded more prophetic than political. But that's exactly the point. The idea that leadership comes from divine appointment rather than democratic process reveals how deep this Christian worldview runs. It's not just politics, it's psychology. Let's break this down into advantages and disadvantages, because whether you agree with her or not, the conversation is worth having. On the positive side, the influence of Christianity in South Africa has undeniably shaped some of our best qualities as a society. Values like forgiveness, community service, and social justice have deep religious roots. During apartheid, many churches were safe havens for activists. Archbishop Desmond Tutu used his faith to promote human rights and reconciliation. Even today, faith-based organizations do incredible work, feeding the poor, running shelters, and helping with education where the state falls short. But here's the catch. That same influence can become a double-edged sword when it starts dictating how everyone else should live. Because not everyone in South Africa is Christian. We're a pluralistic society: Muslims, Hindus, atheists, traditional African spiritualists, and more. The Constitution guarantees freedom of religion. Yet Christian norms often dominate everything from school prayers to public holidays. You ever notice how no one blinks at a Christmas shutdown, but if you suggest a public holiday for Diwali or Eid, people start clutching their pearls? That's the subtle form of Christian nationalism she's talking about. It's not about laws that say you must be Christian, but a social structure that assumes you already are. It's in the way we define what's normal, decent, or moral. Take education, for example. The debate over comprehensive sexuality education in schools was framed as protecting children from indoctrination. But that rhetoric didn't come from nowhere. It came from religious fear. The assumption that talking about gender or sexuality somehow corrupts children is rooted in conservative Christian ideology. And yet, the same people arguing against it will tell you we must teach our children values. So, whose values exactly? And then there's abortion. The ACDP isn't the only party that's opposed to it, as the woman rightly pointed out. Many politicians across the board, even outside overtly religious parties, adopt Christian moral positions to appeal to their base. They may not quote the Bible in Parliament, but the values behind their arguments often come straight from the pulpit. So yes, she's got a point. Christian nationalism in South Africa doesn't march in with a Bible in one hand and a law in the other. It slips quietly through social norms, through unspoken expectations, through the way we raise children and then talk about leadership. And the reason it's powerful is because it feels normal. But here's where the conversation gets even more interesting. She said, we as progressive people need to stand up. And that's an important call. Because silence is not neutral. If people who believe in human rights, gender equality, and inclusivity don't speak up, then the loudest voices, the ones calling for regression, take over. It's like the internet. Whoever comments the most controls the narrative. Now, let's also be fair. Many South Africans genuinely feel that Christian values provide moral stability in a country struggling with corruption, violence, and moral decay. For them, the rise of Christian influence isn't a threat, it's a return to order. They're not necessarily trying to oppress anyone, they just want to see honesty and compassion in leadership. The problem is when those values start being enforced through laws or public pressure, leaving no space for those who don't share them. So what do we do with this? Well, awareness is the first step. Acknowledging that Christian nationalism exists doesn't mean attacking Christianity. It means questioning whether religion should have that much power in public life. It means asking, can we respect faith while still protecting freedom? Can we separate morality from legislation? Can we build a South Africa where belief doesn't equal authority? Because if we don't, we risk becoming a country where God said so replaces the Constitution as our guiding principle. And that's when democracy starts to crack. So maybe that woman's video isn't anti-Christian. It's pro-accountability. It's a reminder that power, whether political or spiritual, needs to be watched closely. Because, as history has shown, when religion and politics mix unchecked, someone always ends up getting silenced. At the end of the day, faith can be beautiful, personal, and life-changing. But when faith becomes a political weapon, it stops being faith. It becomes control. And that's what she's warning us about. So the next time you see politicians holding hands in church during election season, remember, it's not always about prayer. Sometimes it's about power. And the question is, whose power are we really serving? That's something worth thinking about.